Alright everybody, how we doing today? Time to do one of my favorite things in political commentary. Make fun of the European Onion, because they make me cry. Alright, let's start this off with an article from Roughly, and it says, once NATO recovers, we'll be there. Russian FM Lavrov jokes about Macron's brain-dead NATO diagnosis. French President Emmanuel Macron was the perfect man to diagnose NATO as being brain-dead. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov quips saying Moscow is ready for the bloc's recovery from all ailments. I wouldn't want to drag myself into a discussion about the medical side of the issue, Lavrov told reporters at an arms control event in Moscow on Friday. He added sarcastically, if Macron had felt the diagnosis he made of NATO was so evident, he had all the right to state it. He knows NATO better than me, since he represents a nation which is a member of the alliance. Ooh, yeah, because Russia's not in there. Lavrov noted that Russia remains interested in building mutually beneficial relations with the U.S.-led bloc, which would be based on an equal footing. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that the transatlantic military alliance was designed for confrontation since its inception, and he too quipped about Macron's take on NATO's current state of affairs. Whether NATO is alive or dead, and which of its parts are comatose, that's not for us to decide. We're not pathologists. The French president had previously argued that NATO is undergoing its brain death due to the lack of coordination and understanding among its members. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg took offense at Macron's unkind choice of words, saying that he had exaggerated the bloc's internal struggle. Yeah, well, Macron also doesn't acknowledge the issues, the legitimate issues his people have with him. He doesn't acknowledge a lot of things. The dude's self-interest is obvious. As to why he's criticizing NATO, well, maybe he honestly believes what he says. Who's to say he's honestly qualified to talk about NATO in this way? All I know is this. Lack of coordination for any kind of alliance is a terrible thing. But the problem is, this is something I've noticed politicians do, and when they do this, be suspicious as hell of it. Don't give them any room to breathe when they do this. When a politician mentions a problem, but then provides no solution. Because a lot of the time, that just means they're trying to pass the buck. And right here, Macron mentions a problem with NATO, but then provides no solution. This is a pattern that has formed over years. Alright? When politicians do that, I have found time and time again, reading through articles or watching the news, that they're usually caught trying to pass the buck in regards to this issue. Maybe the reason why NATO lacks coordination is because of France. Because of him. That's just a theory, of course. I don't really know that. But Macron could be trying to pass the buck. I wouldn't put it past him. He seems like the type who would do that. A lot of politicians are that type, really. But I find it particularly easy to make fun of it and to pick on Macron. He makes it easy. I really need to find a new target. A new target for my criticism. He makes it so easy. But to go even further in this story, as I expand, we will go to a Reuters article entitled, EU needs to learn the language of power, incoming chief says. The European Union can no longer rely on soft power to promote its interests and must develop more security muscle and policy focus on trade, incoming European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on Friday. Oh, totally not an authoritarian continental superstate. Totally not. No, it's just a trade alliance. They don't actually have any authority to control nations' policies. They're not trying to be a one-world government. No, sir. Or one continent. In a speech on the State of Europe, von der Leyen stressed the EU's strength as a bastion of openness and democracy in a troubled world, and said Brexit had forged a tighter group out of the remaining members of the bloc. And maybe that was their intention. "We must go our own European way with confidence," she said in Berlin. But she added, "Soft power alone won't suffice today. If we Europeans want to assert ourselves in the world, Europe must also learn the language of power. That means, on the one hand, developing our own muscles, where for a long time we could lean on others, for example, in security policy. On the other hand, it means engaging our available power with more focus," she added, pointing to trade ties with China. Von der Leyen, a close ally of German Chancellor Angela Merkel, takes over as Commission President on December 1st. A former German defense minister who will be Commission's first woman chief, she was picked by EU leaders as a unity candidate and part of a package to break stalemate over who should run the EU's top institutions. Born in Brussels, von der Leyen, 61, has top-notch European credentials. A fluent English and French speaker, she worked closely with Paris to promote European defense projects. But she has also had a tough time as German defense minister. "We must be more strategic with a view to Europe's external interests," she said, adding that this included EU enlargement policy. Yeah, there can be no more pretending. Stop lying to yourself and stop lying to me. Don't even bother trying to pretend that the EU is anything other than an experiment in authoritarian globalism, where they will regularly violate the sovereignty of your nation and sell you out kicking and screaming to a centralized authority, which will most likely take the form of a big brother state. I mean, hell, they're already using a lot of classic authoritarian language here. Anyone who sacrifices freedom for security will be able to will have neither. To quote Benjamin Franklin, the control freak that he was over his ideas. This is a clear experiment in global authoritarianism. They'll start with a continent, then if it succeeds, that'll create make a precedent for another union similar, and then another and another. And then you'll have global authoritarianism all across the world. Instead of liberty enlightening the world, you'll have authoritarianism imprisoning it. It was in the EU's interest for countries in the West Balkans to have the prospect of accession to the bloc, she said. French President Emmanuel Macron voted further expansion of the EU at a recent Brussels summit, saying that the accessions process needed to be reformed. But von der Leyen said, "We have demanded a lot from North Macedonia and Albania. They complied in full. Now we must honor our words and facilitate accession talks." Turning to climate policy, she said Europe could play a leading role in the world and showed that green investments can be profitable and sustainable. "We can and must make sure that Europe becomes the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, she said. "Therefore, I will present the first European climate protection law that implements this political goal into binding law. We only have this planet. We need to act now." And, of course, they got to work climate change into it. Because truth is, whether climate change is a thing or not, and it probably is, I'm not going to lie, it's probably a thing. Get off your conspiracy theories. It's probably real. But it's still going to be used as an excuse for authoritarian legislation somehow. Every time you allow the government to create a new piece of legislation, that's just another way they can control your behavior. This is why you should fear politicians. Because they have the ability to gain power without any discipline to back it up. It's fine to become powerful so long as you have an equally powerful discipline and a sense of ethics and self-control. There's no discipline in politics. All you need to do is just get elected. That's it. That's like giving a fat kid the keys to a candy store. That's like giving your teenage son who's only 15 the keys to your car. You think they're what? You think they're just not going to use it? Of course not. These people don't have any discipline or responsibility. Once you give them power, that's all they're ever going to want. It's like an addiction. This is nothing less than a clear experiment in global authoritarianism. You'll start with a continent, and soon it will expand to another continent, another after that, another after that. And if you don't want to listen, you don't want to believe me, fine. But when it all goes down, just remember, I told you so. Peace.